All right, Dwight, it's a blessing. I know it's the weekend. I really appreciate you taking the time because right now I know how busy you are, and so I again thank you so much for being on with me. And just a little background for those that are listening in. You've had more than 30 years living, working in China. You've raised a family in China. You bought property, right? You've been in many. I don't know anybody that's been in more manufacturing companies in China. Own your own, part owner or owner of manufacturing companies in China. Tons of experience across multiple industries, whether aerospace, automotive, telecom, med tech, all of these different industries. Both have lived there and grew up in the United States, so have a unique perspective that I think a lot of people are really going to appreciate, and why it's awesome that you're willing to get together. And so with that, one of the things that I'd like to do, there's been so much chatter and so much going on. Obviously, you've been very much impacted by it with all the tariffs and everything that's going on with the China-US geopolitical relationships that are going on all over the world. And so what it would be great is maybe you can give your perspective on what's actually happening on the ground in China or in Asia in general. Can maybe just start from that premise.
Sure, Jeff, happy to do it. And just to maybe fill out the picture, my name is Dwight Nordstrom. I'm chairman of our family's holding company called PRI, website's priusa.com. We've had actually over 35 equity holdings, most in manufacturing, most have been in China, and since 99, all have been wholly foreign owned. Typically, we're a 30 to 49% owner with a US tech company, manufacturing company, Israeli, European. And I've been a general manager at 7 factories. So I've lived my life on the plant floor. What is happening in China right now as I speak, it's April 26th. So this is a Saturday. As those of you may remember, April 2nd was the Trump administration's massive increase in tariffs. And I'm sure most of you are, like us, are wrestling with how to deal with that. Right now, we're up to about 20 different strategies that we've used. We currently have 10 plus operations in China. I will tell you, I've let some people go in the last 2 weeks. A couple of our factories are dependent upon the US market. Our most profitable factories historically, and now have been ones that actually have a China market, so China for China, and China for other parts of the world, and then China for the US. So in these strategies, they involve some very much intra-company ways of doing things, such as how do we minimize for when we ship product back to the US if a factory is dependent, how do we minimize the cost of that in the bill of lading? What you don't want to do is pay import duty on your profit margin. And we've now actually gone from just making, and in China, I would say if you make 2% profit margin on your China-owned businesses, that's fine. If you're simply just sourcing from China and you don't own the factories, obviously this is much more difficult. But you can work with the supplier about, hey, can you set up in essence, a legal entity in the US where that entity makes most of the profit, but that's after US customs. And so minimizing the customs thing, corresponded warehouses, there's no question right now as we talk, I'm going to give you a number of 145% import duty. That's a moving target, and it depends upon what products you have. So please just take that as a generalization. But obviously, 145%. I would say most of our China-based factories, a 20% import duty, 25, 35. We can probably manage through that. But when it start getting into the 45 and 50% range, it's not, and certainly not at 145%. There, it's simply a question of what are the alternatives for people short term. So a couple of robotic things are probably going to be able to manage that. What's happening on the ground is I get, daily now, my GMs, I'm connecting with them, general managers. And as an example, one of mine in the city of Zhongshan, about 4 million people, we have actually 3 operations within about 50 kilometers of that city. He's got typically a 10-minute commute from his home, his apartment, to the factory. And he normally sees about 40 a day, just one direction, 40-foot containers. He has said the last 2 weeks that's dropped down to 5 or less.
Hmm.
So, just to give you a rough illustration, there's no question business is suffering employment. We're not having any unwanted departures at this time. And I will just tell you how you manage in a downturn too. You want to be careful because sometimes it's your really good people that leave, and those are not the ones you want to leave.
Right.
So what's happening is it's a very challenging time. I will, for the first time, I finished up 17 years plus as the chairman or co-chair of the American Chamber of Commerce China Manufacturing Sourcing Forum. Historically, that was one, if not the busiest subgroup. We had about 400 companies in that group. When I came back to the States during zero COVID, the head of Boeing sourcing and another of our PRI guys are now co-chairs. And I had always avoided doing political things like going to a door knock to Washington, D.C. I'm going this year. We have about 14 other U.S. companies, most publicly traded, all manufacturing, and we'll be meeting with multiple senators, some think tanks, and some of the administration to just try and say, hey guys, can you go from this blunt axe instrument of across the board tariffs to can you consider, is it a U.S. owned company that's paying U.S. income taxes? If you want to sort of have a smile, I get high-tech status for some of my operations there. I pay a 15% income tax at my factories there. I don't get any Chinese government grants. Well, all my things are taxed through, and at a personal level, I'm at a top tax rate. So let's say I'm paying 37%. So I'm actually paying 22% U.S. income tax fully on stuff with my China factories that may not be selling anything to the U.S.
Yeah.
And they're LLCs versus C corp. So the net is, can you consider some alternatives? This is a time where you need to react, you need to respond, you need to look at China plus one. We do have China plus one in Bulgaria, and implementation started, not complete yet in the Philippines. There are other alternatives too. And you just have to try and mitigate it. I do believe there will be a deal with China and the U.S. I don't think it will happen. We're talking now end of April of 25. I suspect it's going to take for more of a real concrete deal. It's going to take to maybe the fourth quarter. So what are the tariffs going to drop back to? Probably similar to what they were before. Let's say 30%. So if you're in an industry that's such low margin, that's there. But they'll do other deal, and it won't be a comprehensive deal. You can't change the Chinese Communist Party system, no matter how much I think those of us in democracies would like to see that happen. The hope of intra-party democracy in China at this point, under the current Communist Party secretary, is just not going to happen. On the flip side, we're having our U.S. companies that we also represent that sell. So U.S. factories making product in China, making products in the U.S., selling to China. China's done reciprocal tariffs. Right now, they're about 125%. They didn't do the 20% for the fentanyl and related things. And you need to immediately respond to that with maybe do some value-added assembly outside of the U.S. or in China. What I will tell you is I do think the deal, so I'm going to give you a counter sort of intuitive, but this is one we are definitely putting resources at. If you believe your U.S. manufacturing company is number one or number two in a really defined niche, I think the middle of the road deal that the U.S. and China will strike will have hundreds of billions of dollars of commitments from the CCP to buy U.S. made products. And so right now, so we're in medical device parts, we're in specialty chemicals. Now is the time to actually start selling in China, even though you're not going to get any immediate, because it takes time to convince the people. But I think once that deal is struck, there'll be excellent opportunities for U.S. companies. And there you say, well, who are you going to be competing? It's going to be other countries in the world. So when China says, I increase my purchases from the U.S. by 2 to 3x, which I think the deal will have, well, where are they going to take those sales away from? Well, some will be state-owned companies that are selling in China to China. Some will be European companies. Some will be your competitors. So this is actually a good time, and you'll need to understand. I mean, more often than not, you have to make engineering adjustments to the products. It's not a simple drop-in replacement that you make in the U.S. But this is a good time to get your. If you're not competitive in the world, ignore it. But if you think you are, I know PRI would love to connect with you and make an analysis there.
And so from that perspective, man, there's so much to talk about, so much to think about through everything you're saying. And so some of that is there's also some of these shifts going on. You talked a little bit about like what's actually happening on the ground and the stories of trucks going through. So I think sometimes because there isn't necessarily that on the ground view from the US, are there other things that just might be helpful to understand of what the impact has been in the Chinese economy or in that world, at least in the
So I
short
mean,
term?
I mean, unfortunately, with two of our operations, I'll just give, we've already since April 2nd, we've in essence terminated or laid off over 200 employees.
Okay.
I don't think those employees, I mean, we're staying in touch with them. I put some people on what's called a leave. The leave is I still pay the minimum wage in that city district. I also pay their health insurance. I will tell you, I can probably stretch it out to about 6 to 8 weeks. But if we don't see changes, those temporary leaves are gonna, transform into actual layoffs, terminations. Um, uh, Nobody it's such a broad-based economy, and the state, one of the negatives, I'm a capitalist, I believe in competition, fair competition, that with the, Xi Jinping coming in as president and party general secretary in really 2013, the Chinese economy had actually gotten to a point to only about 40% was state-owned, government-owned businesses. 60% was not. Well, that's actually reversed now, the whole trend. And right now, over 60% of the economy has some connection to government-controlled entities. That's not a good thing. And the typical leader that I talk to, their first question is not what does the market need, but what is the government saying they're going to focus on? And it's a different thing. And where can I get government grants? And we don't take any Chinese government grants. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that it's going to decrease the growth in China probably 2 to 3%.
Got it. And so from that perspective now, again, going back to I'm a president, I'm an owner of a manufacturing company here, I'm in the United States. I've either got operations or I'm thinking about how the impact is of what's going on in China and the operations. You've talked about a number of different, you had these 20 strategies, obviously not going to have time to go through all those strategies. But if you were going to summarize, like, what are the top 3 things they should be thinking about right now?
Well, so I mean, I'll give one specific, and maybe they can grow out to some macro issues. So, as an example, you do not want to pay import taxes of 100+%, either products going into China or into the U.S. Mm-hmm. So, what if you have legal entities or you have friendly companies, such as ours? So let's say you are buying something from China for your Minnesota-based robotics company. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're buying direct in U.S. dollars from the supplier in China, they're making all their profit margins at their China operation. Well, you're paying 145% or whatever it is on all that profit, which might be, are you in the auto parts business, 18 to 22%? Are you in some of our medical, which is above 40? And so you don't want that. So what we've done is we're buying an RMB from the China supplier. We then sell at basically no profit what we buy to the U.S. company, and then separately they pay us a service charge at our U.S. operation. So at least they're not paying on the profit things. And it's a single for us. Our margins of that are single digit, but we're happy to do that. And you can flip that the other way. So and those are relatively easily implementable. Right now, we're working with let's say a company that deals in linear motion controls, very precise, U.S. based. We're selling their product made in the U.S. to China, and we have just said, look, you need to protect your market, and so go ahead and let us find some of the parts actually from Germany. They have a German operation. Let us do some final assembly in China. And in this case, it drops to zero, the import duty.
Wow.
And we may then source some local parts there as well. The challenge is, is this an FDA thing, which it is not. But if it's an FDA, then of course I got to go through a whole different certification, though we have 1345 qualified factories, et cetera. So Jeff, I'll just say there's markets. You look at markets, you look at the production process, you do have to look at financial and tax as well.
So there's so much, let's say, in the next coming months, we do need to react. We need to make good decisions. If people got questions, there's people that have gone through this, i.e. like you, it's good to reach out and make sure that we're taking action at this point.
And one thing I would also just, this is again, another one that, for those, I'm a little bit older, so for you youngsters, and we're having a joke here.
I got glasses on, Dwight.
So that haven't worked through manufacturing. Whenever you take a factory, so we make medical stents, chemicals, shower doors, composite parts for rotational purposes, for strength purposes, and we can go on and on. What I'll say is that if that factory is doing volatility in production of plus or minus 20%, I'm picking the number out there. I don't even like 20%.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the continuous production stuff, 20% would just be horrific. But what everyone needs to recognize now, I mean, with this shock, if you have a supplier who shuts down temporarily and now they reboot production, I guarantee you for the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to have quality problems. And so the need for quality control, it's not quality control as normal. We're having violent swings in production and factories and suppliers. And if you don't say, I'm going to spend more money and more time, but I must, let's say you were at a Sigma 5 supplier relationship, you got down to the point of you would check one every 4 shipments, and then you would maybe do destructive testing on one component in that. I'm sorry, those days for this next time period are gone, because you need to understand what's happened to that supplier. And most suppliers are letting people go. Think about your own factory here. How long does it take you to train somebody?
Oh, yeah.
To do your, I mean, it can be, even if it's a simple manual job, we're talking 4 weeks, but most of our manufacturing, we're talking 6 months. I mean, some of our electronics and so you simply can't, you need to say this is a new age for right now of quality. And I mean, if you're going to buy a new car, frankly, I would buy a car that was assembled prior to April 2nd of 2025. How's that? And that's just talking about Canada and the US.
Well, and so with that being in mind, so let's just look at the future, right? So over the next, you talked about 18 to 24 months. Over the next, let's call it 3 years, are there other key considerations that we haven't talked about that we should just be watching in the market? Quality being a big one, right? Obviously.
The fundamentals are the US and China for the next 10 years will make up 35 to 40% of the world's economy. There have almost been no times in the world's economic history, going back even 2,000, 3,000 years, where 2 countries have so dominated the world's GDP. And, look, India's coming up, but, they're 1/7 of China right now, of China. And so you need, if you think you are a world-class, world competitive company, you need to be involved with China in some way. The question is it engineering? Is it, modification of products? Is it, trying to withstand local, competition coming from China? And I would say you as a private owner in the US are really well situated if you put your brain to it. I mean, this is the time to compete against a state-owned company in China that's sort of got one hand tied behind their back. They're getting freebies from the China government, but freebies don't last forever in terms of their impact. And so and also now I think that there's Chinese suppliers that are struggling so much. They may, if you have a key supplier that said, I'm never going to come to the US, now is the time to maybe say, hey, look it, let's form some sort of relationship, partnership, exclusive, whatever, and then, work with them in some capacity. We are counterintuitive. I mean, even as a family, in 2017, we had said we've got to not have such a high dependence. We were well north of 80% of our value with operations in China. Again, wholly foreign owned. And so we started 2017 to diversify to some other parts of the world, had become some China plus one. But right now I'm looking at 3 letter of intents for acquisitions of China manufacturing. And if indeed the owners understand, okay, we're going to have to accept a lower valuation, which I think they will, but we're still not. These are not completed, SPAs, full M&A. We'll be doing some acquisitions.
Well, that's so part of it is that would be completely counterintuitive to what many people would be thinking about right now, right? In terms of where they think it. So that's awesome. I guess from that perspective, then maybe close it out with, are there any final takeaways, any final thoughts you'd want to share with an owner or president, like anything that we haven't talked about, any final takeaways?
And Jeff, by the way, when you say a China plus one strategy for manufacturing, it implies China as well. So yeah. I don't think it's not that irrational.
Yeah.
But certainly, we have on our own, we don't have debt. We basically invest our retained earnings in original family funds, but we've knocked down our valuations by 25%. That's a rough thing. It's more or less. Takeaways are, wow. I think the next step is a good group to talk to. You guys have a lot of relationships. I think talk to people that get good advice and who are really operating it. I would say straight consultants who don't have their own operations, they'll talk hypothetical, but right now I would say it's good to talk to people who are actually
on the ground
dealing with it. And I mean, you downplayed, but my heart's been heavy. I've had to review a couple hundred layoffs or temporary suspension of work, and these are all people, and it affects both sides of the ocean. And of course, we pray for I would say, God's peace in the process. So I would say really talk to others, flesh out your ideas, get around the table, and knock out ideas. You will find stuff. And what's interesting, this is not just a typical engineering review where you're looking at 5% changes in cost. And right now, almost any action you can take, I would tell you could probably save 20 or more percent on cost. I mean, so that's just money you're taking away. I mean, as a simple example, if you're shipping to the US right now and you've got enough inventory for the next 45 days, I don't think a deal's gonna be reached in 45 days. Put it in a bonded warehouse. You don't pay US import duties or China import duties it goes both ways until you actually draw that good or product out of the bonded warehouse. even if there's no change, think of the cash flow. Instead of paying 145% today, I mean, and by the way, our company, we don't expect our suppliers, when I have 30 days accounts payable, we pay them. We don't do 90, 120. That's just not good supplier relationships. And I don't expect suppliers to fund us. But look if you don't need that product for 3 months, get into the bonded warehouse. Where's the bonded warehouse? Well, you think the US? Yes. Mexico, Canada, yes. Back in China, yes. Again, this gets to then you say, well, why would I produce it? Well, why you would produce it is if your supplier shuts down, think about the quality issues on restart. So I'd rather have a product sitting in a warehouse. Again, I'm not talking glue. I'm not talking something that's got a lifespan of a few months, but I'd rather have that made now than within the first 4 weeks of a factory restarting itself after being shut down.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. And again, I appreciate the comment about, Lord's peace on all this, because it's obviously a tumultuous time all over the place. And the blessing that can coming from just staying, balanced, trusting, walking through the process and making good decisions.
And I would just say, Jeff, too, just on that, this is the problem with the CCP. It's not the problem with the Chinese people. Now maybe the media starts doing stuff in China, but I'm not seeing among my workers, among my customers, I'm not seeing a backlash against Americans or even Westerners. So just I think in the same way, let us be respectful and understand that the problem is the current governmental system does not fit within the historic WTO sort of frame of reference. Centralized planning and support really is not what the WTO can live with.
I really appreciate that. Having a lot of businesses and friends and families that I've worked with in China and been there many, many times myself, it's pretty easy to lose sight of that. And I think the old thought for me is, as much as I've traveled, as many countries I have, families are families are families. It doesn't matter which country you're in. And in understanding or kind of keeping that mindset is really important. So that sentiment I appreciate immensely. So Noel, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you got a lot on your plate. This has been a blessing. And if anybody has any questions, needs help, whatever it is, reach out. We'll have the links in there for PRI and the next step. We're here to help you. We're all going through the same stuff together. So it's been a blessing. Thank you, Dwight.
Okay. God bless. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.